What you're about to hear sounds like the plot of a Hollywood spy thriller, but every word is true. Imagine this. A striking blonde woman arrives unannounced at a military outpost in West Africa. She's calm, composed, dressed in a crisp field uniform, and claims to be delivering emergency medical aid for children. Her smile is gentle, her credentials flawless, and her French perfect. She says all the right things, but one man isn't buying it. Colonel Ibrahim Traoré, a battle-hardened commander with eyes trained by years of war and betrayal, senses something is off. Her timing is too convenient. Her story, too neat. And when he starts asking the right questions, what he uncovers will blow the lid off an international spy operation, proving that sometimes the most dangerous enemies arrive wearing the face of a savior. The morning heat still shimmered over the red dust of Burkina Faso when the UN-marked vehicle rolled into view. The engine strained as it climbed the slope toward the fortified compound. Soldiers, lethargic from the brutal sun, stirred as the truck came to a halt, and from it stepped Dr. Sarah Magnuson, poised, polished, and completely out of place. Her uniform matched those of global aid workers, but her bearing was too disciplined, her alert gaze too sharp. Even as she smiled, her eyes scanned the compound with the precision of someone trained for more than field medicine. Braided blonde hair gleamed under the sun, and in her arms she carried a sealed white crate stamped "Emergency Medical Supplies, UNICEF Authorized." To the untrained eye, she was a vision of compassion. But Colonel Traoré had seen too much to trust appearances. From the shadows of the main command post, Traoré watched her every step. At 38, he was a veteran of 3 coups, countless skirmishes, and betrayals that had cost men their lives. Just days earlier, he had held a closed-door meeting with 6 of his most trusted officers to discuss rising signs of foreign surveillance. No one outside that room should have known. Yet here she was, offering unsolicited medical support just 72 hours later. Too precise, too soon, too perfect. As she approached the gate, her steps were measured, calculated. She smiled at the guards and spoke in cultured French. "Good afternoon, I'm Dr. Sarah Magnuson from the International Medical Relief Coalition. We received reports of a possible health emergency in this area. We're here to help." The guards exchanged glances. No notice had been given. No request had been made. And yet, she looked the part. Her voice was calm, her expression kind, but instinct still whispered, "Something's not right." That's when Traoré stepped out from the shadows. The moment their eyes met, an unspoken tension charged the air. She registered him immediately, a man used to command, who trusted no one at face value. He spoke with deliberate calm. "Doctor, I'm Colonel Traoré. We weren't expecting medical aid." Her smile didn't falter, but Traoré saw it, a flicker in her expression. A split-second shift. Most would miss it. He didn't. "Colonel," she said smoothly, "humanitarian crises don't wait for appointments. We received intelligence about a possible outbreak, fevers, respiratory symptoms, highly infectious conditions. We brought testing kits and supplies. We can begin immediately with your permission." That one word, intelligence, hung in the air like a spark in dry grass. Traoré narrowed his gaze. "What intelligence?" he asked, his tone casual but his stare unrelenting. There it was again. A pause. Minuscule. Half a heartbeat too long, but enough. She recovered effortlessly. "Reports from regional health monitors, elevated fever rates, clusters of symptoms in nearby villages." Her delivery was flawless, her story plausible. But Traoré wasn't listening to her words anymore. He was reading the space between them. Because real aid groups didn't deploy unannounced. Not here, not like this. Not without clearance, coordination, or a single call. He didn't know who she really was, not yet, but he knew this. She was lying. And within days, That single doubt would unravel a covert operation buried deep within humanitarian cover, revealing just how easily the mask of mercy can hide the machinery of espionage. Sometimes the smiling face at your gate isn't there to save you. It's there to watch, to listen, and to infiltrate. "These health monitoring stations," Colonel Traoré said coolly. "Which specific facilities submitted these reports?" There it was again, a flicker, a pause too small to register as uncertainty for most, but not for him. "I'd have to check my documentation for the precise facility names, Colonel," Dr. Magnuson replied smoothly. "The reports came through our Central Coordination Office in Ouagadougou. If you like, I can radio headquarters for clarification." What she didn't realize was that Traoré already knew the answer. He was in direct contact with every legitimate health center within 200 kilometers. Not a single report of illness, no signs of outbreak, no whispers of contagion. Her story, however perfectly constructed, rested on air. But Traoré didn't move to expose her, at least not yet. He made a choice, one that would ultimately uncover the scale of what she truly represented. Let her in, let her believe she had succeeded, and watch. "Doctor," he said, stepping aside with the gravity of command, "we appreciate your concern. You're welcome to set up in our medical facility. I'll have someone assist you." She gave a gracious nod, but Traoré caught it. That barely visible sigh of relief. It wasn't gratitude. It was the release of tension that comes when a calculated deception passes its first test. As they walked through the compound, she asked all the right questions about population density, water sources, disease exposure. The words fit. The tone was right. But Traoré wasn't listening to what she said. He was watching what she did. Her eyes swept over defense posts, communication gear, fuel storage. Her attention lingered where it shouldn't have. Her hands clutched the medical crate not like someone protecting bandages or antibiotics, but like someone guarding classified cargo. The compound's medical building was humble, enough to treat injured soldiers and the occasional villager. Dr. Magnuson surveyed it with professional detachment, yet Traoré noticed how she subtly studied the location of power lines, radio repeaters, and sight lines to perimeter towers. "This will do perfectly," she said, setting the white crate down with clinical precision. "I'll need about an hour to calibrate our equipment. With your permission, I'd like to begin screening your personnel this afternoon. Early detection is key." She was in a hurry, too much so. Real aid workers knew these setups took time, coordination, briefings, translators, but she wanted access, fast. That urgency told Traoré everything he needed. He agreed, but assigned Sergeant Konaté to assist her, a loyal, sharp-eyed soldier who understood the mission without needing to be told. Help her, watch her, record everything. "Left alone in the clinic, Doctor." Magnuson moved quickly. Konaté reported that her efficiency was real, but misplaced. Rather than focusing on diagnostic tools or infection control, she bypassed the top layer of medical supplies and reached beneath. There, hidden among antiseptic packs and gauze, were compact electronic components. Some bore NATO serial markings, others were untraceable. She worked fast, assembling what appeared to be communication relays and miniature antenna arrays. One device in particular, small, black, sleek, was nothing Konaté had seen in any medical deployment. It looked like a signal interceptor or transmitter, not something to treat fevers. While she worked, Colonel Traoré was making moves of his own. He began a quiet verification of her identity. On paper, everything checked out. Too perfectly. The International Medical Relief Coalition was real. So was Dr. Sarah Magnuson. Her degrees, her CV, her fieldwork, credible. But Traoré had seen it before. The best lies weren't pure fiction. They were built around just enough truth to be bulletproof. So he placed a discreet call. Not through official channels, but through a contact in European intelligence who owed him a favor. The conversation was short, encoded, not even interpretable to anyone eavesdropping. The confirmation came through in less than 5 minutes. Sarah Magnuson was a doctor, but her humanitarian missions routinely placed her in the orbit of geopolitical flashpoints, hot zones, disputed borders, energy corridors. She had been present, always conveniently, just before or after key intelligence coups that favored Western interests. And each time, valuable intel had been gathered, intel that later shaped diplomatic outcomes or military actions. The pattern wasn't luck, it was tradecraft. This woman hadn't come to fight disease. She'd come to collect something far more valuable. And now she was inside his base. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Dr. Sarah Magnuson informed Colonel Traoré she was ready to begin medical screenings. She appeared tired, understandably so, after a full day of setup. That night, she requested a place to rest. Traoré granted her use of the compound's guest quarters, complete with all necessary comforts. But what she didn't know was that the real accommodations had already been prepared behind the walls. Discreet surveillance devices, trained eyes, and ears tuned to capture every whisper. Guards were assigned to rotate shifts outside her room, their official role, hospitality, their true role, containment. By 11:30 p.m., with the compound settled into its usual quiet hum, that containment strategy paid off. Sensors picked up a sharp spike in encrypted electronic activity coming directly from Dr. Magnuson's quarters. Hidden beneath the outer layer of her equipment, she had deployed a high-frequency transmitter, something no doctor should carry. For 7 minutes, data pulsed into the sky, beamed toward a European satellite network later confirmed as part of an intelligence-sharing consortium. The contents of the transmission were damning: maps of the compound, troop strength, defense placement, comms infrastructure, and one final chilling line of text: Nightingale Protocol initiated. Primary target confirmed accessible. It was no longer speculation. She wasn't just gathering intel, she was prepping for something bigger. At 3 a.m., Traoré was briefed, and by dawn, he had made his decision. Dr. Magnuson emerged that morning with her professional mask in place, smiling, cheerful, polite. She greeted the soldiers with warm concern, casually asking who might be first for the day's health screenings. But Traoré saw it for what it was, a final act before the curtain dropped. Inside the compound's medical building, she was busy arranging what looked like a mobile diagnostics station when Traoré entered, flanked by 2 of his most trusted officers. She looked up and smiled, radiant and ready. "Good morning, Colonel," she said brightly. "We can begin screenings whenever your team is ready. Perhaps we start with your officers. Early detection is key after all." Traoré gave her a long, unreadable look. "Before we begin, Doctor," he said evenly, "there's something I need your help understanding." "Of course," she replied, unfazed. "What would you like to know?" He gestured to her equipment with calm precision. "I'm curious about a device you assembled last night around 11:30 p.m. The one equipped with multiple antenna arrays that transmitted data to a European satellite for exactly 7 minutes." She didn't flinch. Not exactly. Her smile held. But something shifted behind her eyes. Just a flicker. The mind recalculating, the instinct to adapt kicking in. "I'm not sure what you mean, Colonel," she said, voice steady. "I didn't use any comms gear. I spent the night preparing screening protocols and organizing my supplies." Traoré stepped forward slowly, eyes never leaving hers. At the table, he opened her white crate with methodical care, removing each medical item with deliberate respect. "Doctor, I've always admired the selflessness of medical workers," he said softly. "My sister is a nurse. She's served in some of the toughest refugee zones in this region. I know what real humanitarian dedication looks like." Magnuson's gaze remained locked on the crate, watching as he reached the final layer. "Colonel," she said carefully, "I don't understand the need for this." But she stopped short as he pulled away the last level of gauze and medicine, revealing the sleek black shell of encrypted surveillance equipment. "Because," he said quietly, "I believe you are insulting every person who ever risked their life in the name of mercy by using their work as a mask for espionage." The air in the room changed. The warmth evaporated. The game was over. Magnuson's eyes locked onto the exposed devices, antenna clusters, signal interceptors, storage drives, all of it clearly meant for intelligence work. Her mind raced, but there were no exits, no backup plan, no quick way out. "Colonel, I can explain," she began. Traoré held up a hand. His tone hardened, not with anger, but with the unyielding steel of command. "Doctor, or whoever you really are, I'm going to offer you something you don't deserve. A choice. You can tell me the truth. Your mission, your agency, your objectives. Or you can keep lying. But if you choose to continue this performance, I will deliver all of this, everything, to the international press. I will name your organization. I will release the transmission logs. And the world will decide what it thinks of this little game." He let the silence hang, thick with consequence. Magnuson stood frozen, caught in the wreckage of her own deception. For the first time since arriving, the practiced calm slipped. Because she knew Traoré wasn't bluffing. The weight of her situation settled over Dr. Sarah Magnuson like a concrete shroud. She had been trained for moments like this: interrogation, exposure, the collapse of a cover identity. But she hadn't anticipated facing someone like Colonel Traoré, strategic, disciplined, and utterly unshakable. "What evidence?" she asked, stalling, grasping for options that no longer existed. Without a word, Traoré nodded to one of his officers. The man stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the table between them. Inside, photos, logs, satellite intercepts. "Satellite imagery of you deploying your transmitter," Traoré began. "Encrypted communications between your equipment and a European intelligence satellite. Logs of your data transfer, compound schematics, troop counts, communication frequencies." Each page turned was another nail in the coffin of her mission. The proof was clinical, precise, devastating. But Traoré wasn't done. "We also have full audio surveillance," he said. "From the moment you entered this compound, every conversation, every movement, every covert action, documented, recorded, analyzed." Magnuson sat down slowly, the strength draining from her posture. The composure she had worn like armor since her arrival cracked under the pressure of irrefutable truth. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly, her voice stripped of confidence. "I want the truth," Traoré said. "Who sent you? What was your mission? What agency do you serve? And what exactly were your objectives inside my compound?" Silence fell. She sat motionless, calculating. There were only 3 paths now: deny, negotiate, or confess. But denial was no longer sustainable, and negotiation required leverage she no longer had. "My name is Sarah Magnus," she said at last, barely audible. "I am a doctor. I've worked with humanitarian organizations. But that's not why I'm here." Traoré didn't interrupt. He let the moment breathe. "I work for a European intelligence consortium," she continued. "Our task is to monitor political and military activity in high-risk regions. My medical credentials gave me access, cover, nothing more." "Your mission?" he asked. "To assess the defensive layout of your base, count your troops, evaluate communication infrastructure, identify weak points. My role was surveillance, intelligence collection. I don't know what was planned after that." For a long moment, Traoré said nothing. The air felt heavier now. This hadn't just been a data grab. It had been groundwork for something more, perhaps military intervention, a coup, or covert sabotage. "Who authorized the operation?" he asked, voice low. "I can't tell you that," she replied more firmly now, "even if I wanted to. If I give you names, I endanger others. That's not something I'll do. Traoré studied her. He respected her resolve, but that didn't mean she was absolved. You understand, he said calmly, that your silence leaves me with no diplomatic route. If you won't speak, I'll have to make your actions speak for you. He gestured to his officers. Video equipment was brought in and arranged without ceremony. Cameras were positioned, lights powered on. This was no interrogation, this was documentation. Magnuson's eyes widened slightly. Colonel, please reconsider. If you make this public, it won't just destroy me, it will damage humanitarian work everywhere. My family, my colleagues. Not all of them are spies. And that, Traoré replied, his voice colder now, is the true cost of what you've done. You didn't just betray my command, he continued. You betrayed every nurse, every medic, every aid worker who steps into danger carrying nothing but courage and compassion. You've turned them into suspects. You've poisoned the well for all of them. He stepped into frame as the cameras rolled. This, he said, eyes fixed on the lens, is what happens when humanitarian aid is used as a mask for espionage, when trust is weaponized, when mercy is manipulated. The footage showed Magnuson in the room, the electronic surveillance gear laid bare, the logs, the photos, the full account of how a trained operative infiltrated a sovereign military facility under false humanitarian pretenses. By the end of the day, the video had been delivered to major news networks, uploaded to diplomatic channels, and shared across global social platforms. The response was immediate and explosive. Governments were forced to respond. Intelligence agencies scrambled to manage the fallout, and everywhere, humanitarian organizations felt the ripple. Trust fractured, motives questioned, safety compromised. Dr. Sarah Magnuson had come to collect intelligence, but she left behind something far more dangerous: doubt. And Colonel Traoré's message echoed louder than any bullet or broadcast. If you come wearing the mask of mercy, you'd better mean it. Because this time, the truth didn't just surface. It fought back. Dr. Sarah Magnuson was quietly repatriated to Europe through discreet diplomatic channels. Her career, both in medicine and covert intelligence, was over. The public knew her only as a disgraced humanitarian. Behind closed doors, her former handlers acknowledged the truth. One of their best operatives had been outmaneuvered by a man far more prepared than they had ever anticipated. But this wasn't just the end of one mission. It was the start of something much larger. Colonel Traoré's decision not to bury the incident, but to expose it in full daylight, sent shockwaves through the global intelligence community. For decades, covert operations had hidden behind the veil of compassion. Aid workers had been used as pawns in geopolitical games, shielded by the assumption that no one would dare challenge the sanctity of humanitarian missions. Traoré shattered that illusion. His methodical exposure, complete with surveillance footage, intercepted data, and live recordings, forced intelligence agencies to rethink their strategies in every region under his influence. It wasn't just a warning. It was a line drawn in red earth. If you come under false pretenses, you will be unmasked. For real humanitarian organizations, the fallout was painful. Trust had always been fragile in conflict zones, and this incident cracked it even further. Every doctor, every nurse, every aid worker who entered a war-torn village would now do so under a shadow of suspicion. The damage wasn't theoretical. It was operational. Lives would be lost, access denied, aid delayed, and that was the true cost of weaponizing compassion. But perhaps the most lasting impact was the legend of Traoré himself. He hadn't simply exposed a spy. He had dismantled an entire framework of deception using nothing but logic, instinct, and unflinching resolve. His actions became a blueprint for other commanders facing similar threats. His name began to circulate in whispers through briefing rooms, strategy sessions, and even spy training academies. Not as a threat, but as a case study in what happens when your target doesn't play the game by your rules. Years later, When intelligence historians revisited the mission, they didn't just study the collapse of a cover. They marked it as a turning point, a moment when the balance of power subtly shifted. The day a small, overlooked compound in West Africa reminded the world that even the most sophisticated lies can be unraveled by a mind sharp enough to ask the right question at the right time. The white crate that once held medical supplies and concealed state-of-the-art espionage tools was preserved as evidence, a stark reminder that in today's world, deception often wears the face of mercy. And inside that compound, the story lives on. Soldiers still tell it in hushed tones, the day their commander looked into the eyes of an angel and saw the devil's mission underneath. What would you have done in Colonel Traoré's place? Should intelligence agencies be held accountable when they hijack humanitarian missions for espionage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story opened your eyes to the hidden world beneath global diplomacy, subscribe now for more untold stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines.